Okay, so good morning to one and all. Now we are in the last chapter of your unit 1. So we have already completed your 5 chapters from your unit 1, and that were the more important chapters. Now this one chapter is just to tell you that how we can go with the web application creation. So we are just going to see the steps, one or two, the concepts. And still I'm telling you that this chapter is something like not that important as per your exam point of view. It just giving you the practical overview that how you can start with your practicals. Okay, so your chapter 5 is your working with servlets. So we have enough studied about the servlets in all the 5 chapters. Okay, so starting with the introduction of the servlets, we have seen that why we are choosing the servlets over your traditional technology, that is your CGI. Then we went to the second one where we have learned about the tire architectures, all the types of tire architectures which we can use while developing the web application using your servlets. Then we went to the third chapter where we have learned about the packages. Okay, and then we also have seen the servlet life cycles. Then we have went to the last chapter where we have the database connectivity, which is the most important one throughout your enterprise Java. We need JDBC. We also know that why we are opting for JDBC over the ODBC, even though the ODBC is not at all dependent on the drivers of the database. It doesn't expect the drivers from the databases. But JDBC expects, and the JDBC is like only going to specifically work for the Java applications. Okay, so these all things we have studied. Now we just go through that how we can start with the practical, how we can start with the project creation. So this we are going to see in this particular chapter. So we are going to finish this chapter today only so that we can wind up with the unit 1. Okay, and most probably, like if I'll complete unit 1, we'll have a small test by tomorrow or like maybe on Saturday, something like that. So just prepare yourself, not tomorrow at least. So I can give you the time. I have all the notes in my drive link, all the video lectures in the drive link, everything I have provided to you. Okay, so please start preparing yourself. On Saturday, most probably I'll keep your test on unit 1. So it is also possible that it is not only going to be MCQ based, but it is also going to be some descriptive thing. So it is just an expectation. See, we cannot do the supervision right online, but it's just an expectation and hope that you will be genuinely doing that test at your end. Okay, so last time I have given you the MCQs for 2 chapters, but only 20 people have responded out of 36 people present. And when you talk about the TYA division, there were 44 students, but 37 people have responded both the quiz. Okay, so this is like I don't want. So please, whatever questions I am giving it to you, solve it. You never know when I'm going to include it in the internals. Okay, I'm telling you that I'm not going to see to it. I'm not, worry what you are answering to me. But if this continues, then unfortunately I have to include it in your internal so that only you can be serious while giving that quiz. Fine. So now the chapter 5 from your unit 1, that is your working with servlets. Now we'll just start with the introduction that when we talk about the working with servlets, that's basically is talking about the process of web application development. Okay, and that application which we are going to develop as a developer using this technology is going to deliver to my client or my database through the internet or through a remote sessions. Okay, and as we know that the servlet is nothing but it's a Java program. It's a small module which comes under your Java. Okay, so that which is going to be run by your Java servlet engine, or you can say it is going to be run by your web server. It is going to be run by your host server. Okay, there are number of names we have given to your servlet engine. Okay, so if any name comes like your web server or a servlet engine, okay, the containers, they're all same. Okay, so that one place will we try to execute our Java program, and that program is going to hold some servlet code, some servlet module, and that is going to be executed. Okay, and whatever output is going to be generated by your servlet code is going to be delivered to your client through your web browser. Okay, so this we know that how the output is going to be delivered to the client. Delivering the output to the client in which form, that also we have to instruct to our program, instruct to our Java code. Fine, so that all we have to mention it whenever we are going to code for our servlets. So this is like why we are using servlet. Servlet is something being used, like one of the technology which is being used for developing the server side, first of all the code, okay, and that is going to help me to develop the complex applications which can be, able to communicate with my client as well as my database over the internet. Also it is like a code, a piece of code which has been written inside your Java program, okay, and the code whatever we are writing, the servlet code is going to be executed inside your servlet engine, which can also be known as container, which can also be known as your web server. Fine. And whatever output the servlet is going to have, that output, is going to deliver to the client using your web browser, through your web browser in the form of web pages. Okay. And when we talk about the platform which we are going to use in our practical, that I have already shared with you, that is your NetBeans IDE. Okay, so that NetBeans IDE is coming, the inbuilt server, that is a Glassfish server. And if you remember, we know that we had two types of server, that is one is Apache Tomcat and one is Glassfish server. I told you that we are opting for the Glassfish, even though we have some, advantages in your Apache Tomcat over your Glassfish. Still we are going with the Glassfish server just because we have two types of technologies. We have web application technologies and we have enterprise application technologies. Okay, and I hope you remember that what are the web application technologies and what all are the, enterprise application technologies. When we talk about the web application, it is something which is going to be, developed using your servlet and JSP. And when we talk about the enterprise, it is like using the Hibernate, JSF, or we can talk about Hibernate struts. So whatever the enterprise application technologies we have, we are not going to, easily work with the Apache Tomcat. Okay, so we are switching to the Glassfish because Glassfish supporting both the types of application technologies. So we don't have to depend for one thing on one server and the other thing for the other server. Okay, so from the starting, we are going to stick to one server, that is a Glassfish. I told you somewhere in the lecture that Glassfish comes inbuilt in your, development kit what you download, and it is coming with your platform, that is something your NetBeans IDE. It's in built-in support. There is a built-in support for this server which can run the Java servlets or the other application technologies. The only thing is that sometimes if at all not happening with the inbuilt, server, we have an option to add it externally also. That means it is freely available. First of all, it's an open source server available, so we can easily download it. Okay, and when we download it, we can add it externally to our NetBeans. Okay, so that how we are going to do it, that also we'll see. But here just up to understand that we also have an built-in support for this server. Sometimes we don't need to install the, Glassfish server software externally or separately. It can run within your NetBeans ID using this server because it is already there. If at all this is not supporting, if at all this is not running, so what we can do, we can have an option to install externally and connect to this NetBeans ID. Fine. So this is like the basic thing we should know whenever we are going to work with a, or we are going to do our practicals. Now, what do you mean by web application? So this, I don't think so I have to focus more because we all know what web applications are. We have studied more than this already in rest 5 chapters. Okay, sometimes it is also called as web app. Web application can be, the bigger, it can be complex. As per the requirement of the client, it is going to be developed. Okay, and it is something which is going to be accessed using your web browser over the network. We all know this. If you want to access any web page, okay, if we want to access any dynamic web pages, if you want to access something which is remotely located somewhere else, okay, so that we can use or access using your web browser over the network. Okay, and that can be your internet or an intranet. Fine. Now, while many web applications are written directly in many of the languages like your PHP or Perl, so Java is going to remain as a commonly used programming language for writing the web application. I told you that more than 10 billion products are running on Java right now. Okay, take any form, take any product, anything you talk about, it is including Java because of its features, because of its, the flexibility what Java is giving to the developers. Fine. When we talk about the other languages, there are a number of constraints comes, that like for example the APIs maybe, say for example the languages, call it as .NET. Okay, I don't know about much because I'm not into that, because when I know Java, so it always like obvious that I don't know the .NET. Okay, so it's my area of interest, so I know much more about the Java. Fine. So Java is actually providing you an option to create your own APIs. So for example, you are a student and you just want to create some application, and you want to add some feature into your application which maybe the API or the library is not present in your Java development kit. So it gives you flexibility that develop your own API which will work for you what you want to do it in your application, add it into the existing development kit and start using it. Okay, so this is the flexibility which this language is providing it to you, and there are a number of languages which don't have such features. Okay, when you talk about C++, it will never going to allow you to have this kind of features that you create your own library and add it and start using it. Never happens. So number of AI applications also need this, because there are a number of features which are already available is going to be used by the application, and they have the option to add their own when they want to use it. So platform dependency, we can talk about robustness, we can talk about the scalability, number of features this language is providing it to me. So that's why even though I have to do it everything by by own, I don't have to have any automatic generation of the code in my Java programming, still I can go with this programming language, because what this language is providing me about the what features we have studied just now is not been provided by any language. Okay, so what web applications are, that's something which has been giving to the client for accessing the resources, for accessing the data using the web pages which comes through your web browser, and it goes through your internet or from your intranet. Okay, and maximum time if you just find out any application, you'll find Java into it. Okay, now, this is something an organization of a web application, that how your web application is going to work. And when we talk about the web application which we are going to develop using our platform, that is your NetBeans IDE, then how what is your going to be the what structure you're going to have. Okay, so you're going to have very first is what your root. So this is like one hierarchy we have. So every application, every web application is going to have a root directory. In that root directory, now for example, if you remember, we have created a web application. I have shown you the whole steps. In that you can see, whenever you're going to create your web application, the very first thing which comes, the name of your application at the left hand side. I'll show you that their screenshots are there still in this PPT. I'll show you that also. Okay, so in that web application or in the project what you have created, everything which is going to be included inside that project. It's nothing that we are going to create outside of it, and we are going to link or we are going to connect to. No, it's only one thing which is present externally, that's your database. Okay, including your client programming, including your client web page, or including your server side programming, is everything been included into one project which you are going to create it. Okay, so they are going to communicate with each other very easily because they are into one directory, one place. So more example if I can give you, if you remember, we had that file input stream output stream program. Okay, so what we used to do, we used to create a Java file and we used to create a txt file. Correct. So if I am keeping both the files in the same folder, so work is going to be easy for me, because I don't have to mention the part where the text file is located, from where the Java file has to go and search that text file and connect to that file and give me the data whatever I'm expecting. Okay, so in the program is going to be less for me, the work is going to be less for me if it is pressing into one same directory. Fine, so here also you don't have option to put it separately. Okay, so what you are going to do it, whatever you are going to create for your application, you want the web pages for the client, you want the server side program for your for your servlet, so everything has been placed into one directory so that they can communicate with each other, they can identify each other very easily. Fine, now this is a root directory. Now what all things been included into your web application. So we are going to have a WEB-INF, web information. Okay, so this web information is going to come with your web.xml file, and this is going to have some classes, that is your Java classes, that is going to be all the server side classes files from this module which we are going to include it. Okay, they have written optional, but it's not optional, we have to include the web.xml file. Okay, now, next thing, what has been also included into your web application or in your project, that is your web resources. So now two more important things over here. One, the web resources, which is going to include your HTML file or your JSP file, which will help me to develop my, the web pages or the client UI. Also, I'm going to have number of things like your server side language, that is your maybe servlet or a JSP, which I'm going to write for my server, which will help me to communicate with my client and the database. Okay, so this is all comes in under your web resources. And when we talk about the WEB-INF, that is a web information, compulsorily we have web.xml file into it, okay, which will help me to map, or which will help me to have that information about the mapping, that which file is mapped to the which file, from where the data has been redirected to the another file, that all been included into your web.xml. And then we're also going to have the number of classes which we have created inside your Java language. Fine. So this is like one web structure, or we can say the organization of an web application has been given. So we should remember this so that it's very easy for us to understand that how your web applications are working. Now, as I told you, that web application is going to define a hierarchy of directories, okay, and it is going to be followed in all the programs, in all the applications which we are going to create it. Okay, so now here the system administrator deploys all your applications into a particular server, and he or she can assign a context path to your application. Now, I hope that you know what you mean by context path. Here the system administrator is you who is going to, deploy the, because you are playing both the role. You are a developer also and you are the system administrator also. You have developed an application, now you want to deploy it. So what do you mean by deploying? You're just going to execute what you have created. Once you start the execution, basically your program or your application is going to get deployed in your the virtual machine, or you can say the servlet engine, what we have for developing or for creating the servlet side programming. So you are playing both the role as a developer also, as a system administrator who is going to develop also, who is going to deploy the application also into the server. And that server, what we are using it right now in this subject for the practical, that is a glassfish server. Okay, and being a developer or a system administrator, we are going to assign a context path. So now what context path is, it is something if I want to redirect from my client page to the server page. Okay, so for example, I have developed an HTML file where I have written some client side code. I have a servlet programming which I have written for the server side. So what is my expectation is, once I am going to have my redirection from the client to the server, what is my expectation is, as a developer, is that my client is going to give me some input. That input should get fetched by my servlet program, and that servlet program is going to process that request. Okay, so that all thing happens once you start deploying it, and that redirection is going to be given in the context path. If you remember, I have just shown you the link of the drive link. The very first is your host name, and whatever is been attached to it, that is something being given as in redirection path. Fine. So of your application, within your application where you are actually redirecting, that is all been getting attached to your URL in your context path. Fine. Now the next is what your web resources. So now web resources are nothing but they are the software artifacts. Okay, so that web application requires for many reasons. It is required for including the images. It is required for including the scripting files. It is also been used for creating the component libraries or packages. So for that all needs, we need a web resources. Now, if you remember the diagram, so in that diagram, what we have said, the web resources are something what we are going to include all the client side and the server side programming languages, which will help me to develop something, which will help me to have, the APIs, which will help me to have the packages to be included in my program. So this is like something called it as web resources. Okay, and the web resources is including one term, that is something we're known as what, web module, and which is something a smallest unit which is deployable also, which is usable also of your web resources. Now it is something which has been defined in your Java servlet specification. It is been used with your servlet application. Okay, and the top level directory of your web application hierarchy is always going to be a root directory, or something which is called it as your project, what we are going to create it. Okay, and all the HTML files, all the JSP files which we are going to create or which we are going to use to develop our client side pages, that is going to be placed inside your web resources. Fine. Now, when we talk about the web information, so if you remember, we had a root and then we had two different parts. One was your WEB-INF and one was your web resources. So we have learned about the web resources. Now we are just learning what about the WEB-INF, web information. Okay, so in WEB-INF folder, so we have three things been included. First is your web.xml file, that is been something known as deployment descriptor. Always remember students, web.xml file is also been known as what? Deployment descriptor. Okay, which will help me to deploy my web application, and it will help me to keep the information about the mapping from one page to the another page within your application. Okay, so that's why it is known as what? Deployment descriptor. Next, what is going to be included inside your folder called as WEB-INF, that is your classes. Okay, so this directory is also containing the Java classes which is required for your application, web application. It can include both servlet classes and the non-servlet classes, and that are not been combined into your jar files. Okay, which are not been combined to your jar files, but it is going to be there in your INF folder that is inside your classes file. Last is comes your, that is libraries, lib. Okay, so this directory containing all the jar files. So always remember, see, I told you that we have an option to include the external APIs or external libraries or external, you can say, the packages. Say for example, now when I am going to have a database connectivity, okay, so the Java development kit or the NetBeans platform IDE generally, or you can talk about the JDK, generally don't have one of the connector, MySQL connector. Okay, so we know that which database we are going to work in future for the practical, that is your MySQL, and we know that we are going to work with the NetBeans IDE. Okay, so if I want to write some code for a servlet, I have written the code for a servlet, I have written for an HTML for the client. Okay, now I am also going to connect my client to my server, and I want to connect my server to my database. And how to connect my server to the database, we have learned in the last chapter using your JDBC, that is your database connectivity. We know that we are going to use the MySQL. Okay, and we have also learned about the steps, all the steps, what we are going to write for have the connectivity properly with my database. Maybe it is your import statement or your registration of JDBC driver or your connection interface, statement interface, or a result set interface. Everything we have learned, everything we have made the clear that how we are going to use all the things individually with the database. But when we are going to connect to a database, call it as MySQL, there is a specific package available, specific library available. You can easily Google it. Okay, just type MySQL connector jar file. It will give you an option to download it. It hardly comes into some MBs. So just download it, and that connector file, that jar file, or you can say that library, you have to add it into your existing jar folders. Okay, existing your library folder of your NetBeans ID. So when we talk about that creation of web application, so when we create an application, so we have number of folders which gets automatically created. So one folder is going to be for your client, so it is something being known as web pages. One folder which has been created automatically, it's something known as source packages, which will consist of server side programs. Okay, one folder is going to be your WEB-INF, so which is going to consist of web XML classes and the library package. Inside your library package, there are n number of libraries are there already, which is there defined in your NetBeans IDE in your development kit. Okay, but some which is not there, we have to add it externally. So when we download it from the internet, it is very easy for me to just add it into my the existing library folder. Okay, so here this third one is saying that the jar folders are available, okay, in NetBeans, which contains numbers of Java classes files or a number of libraries, okay, which is required for your application. But we also need some third party class libraries, like for example, which we are going to use for our database connectivity, so that we can include it externally very easily. There is no coding, no steps, nothing. Just how we copy and paste some files into one folder to the another folder, it happens similarly into your library folder in your NetBeans. So it is that easy to add some external APIs into your existing one. Fine. So these three folders were important. Now we know what deployment descriptors are. They are something been also known as web.xml file. Okay, that is going to be included into your web application as your file name extension, telling me that this file is nothing but an XML document which defines everything about your application that server is going to need and that server is going to know. Okay, except the context path which is going to be assigned by the system administrator. Now this is going to be assigned automatically when we are going to switch from one page to the another page. It is going to get attached to your existing URL or an existing path. Fine. So what context path are, if you can see over here, so if I have an URL, okay, if I'm referring to the something called as index.html, this is my basic common client page which I have created, I have coded. Now out of this, which path I am requesting and I want to go to the page, that is your bookshop page. So this is going to be your context path. Fine. From your client page, from your basic home page, then I'm switching to the another page, that is something we known as what, bookshop. So I'm just going to the context path. I'm increasing the context path. Now we'll start with the steps that what we are going to do it when we talk about the NetBeans IDE. So I hope this all is been clear to you all about the concepts what we have learned just before this, the example of creation of web application. So you should know what deployment descriptor are. So that is something in web.xml file which consisting of number of things. Or we have to understand what context path are, what is the hierarchy of your web application, which what all things it is been consisting of. It can consist of web resources, which talks about the languages you are going to use for your client as well as server. You also understand that is going to including one WEB-INF folder. Okay, so where it is been included, we all see with this now the creation of web application steps. Okay, so now the very first step which we are going to do is what, we are going to open the NetBeans ID, and the very first thing which you are going to see is what, your file option in your application in your ID. Okay, so here when you click on to the file, you have an option called as new project. Okay, just click onto this new project. I'm going to share this PPT with you all students. I have given you the softwares already in the drive link I have shared to you. Okay, just download it, just install it. Okay, and then follow these steps what they are doing it over here. So that way you can at least start doing this creation of the web application, so you will understand, you will be familiar with the platform. Fine. Now once you click onto the file and select the new project, this something window is going to come in front of you. So what you have to do, you have to select an option called as Java Web from the categories. And once you click onto the Java Web, automatically the projects are going to change over here. So if you click on Java, if you click on Java EE, if you click on NetBeans modules, things are going to change over here. Okay, so as per requirement, what is you want, what you want to develop it, you can select from here. Okay, so now what I have done, I have to create a new web application. So I'm just going to have a Java Web as a folder, as a category from your left hand side, and out of that I am going to select what, a web application which I want to create it. And then simply go to the next step. You just have to mention your project name over here, what name you want to give. Remember, whatever name you are going to give it over here is going to be your class name, or you can say your file name. Okay, so once we have given the name over here, we are just going to the next step. Now here the server you have to select. So I've told you that we have two options. Okay, either we can select it implicitly, that means which we have it directly from the inbuilt option where the NetBeans ID is having existing Glassfish server comes bundled or comes along with it. And if at all it is not working, you want to add it externally. So what you have to do it first, I have given the drive link where you have the NetBeans ID, you have a JDK, and you have a Glassfish. So download that Glassfish server externally in your machine. Okay, once it is getting installed in your machine, then what you can do, either if you want to use the inbuilt one, select from the drop down. Okay, so whichever versions the NetBeans ID is having, you can use that. Now here also we can have the other option to use externally. See, whatever version the Glassfish server has been bundled with your NetBeans IDE, maybe it can be an older version. Okay, so if you want to switch to the higher version, so what you can do, you can download the higher version Glassfish and externally add it. Okay, so if you want to add it internally, just click on the drop down. So whichever server you want to use, it can consist of Apache Tomcat also, it can consist of Glassfish server also, use any of that and just go ahead. Or else if you want to add it externally, just click on add button. Okay, from here you have number of other steps to perform that we will do whenever we are going to add it externally. Okay, but from here you can add it, browse it from where you have installed your Glassfish. copy that path and just your server has been added over here. Similarly, for Java EE version, we are learning Java EE 7. So from the drop down, you have Java EE 7 option. Just select that one. Okay. And now this is going to be your what? Context path. Fine. Now whatever, then this is your something known as what file. This is your the file name. This is your class name. So wherever you're going to, switch to your the other pages, it is going to add, something in front of it. Now we are going to just say finish the application. Now this is how you're going to have a web application named as what? First. So now this first is going to be your assembly root, or you can say it is going to be a root directory. You can see everything comes under this particular folder. Okay, nothing is something which has been created outside to it and then we have to connect to. No, everything has been included inside your first web application, that is your this application which we have created just now. Okay, so if you'll see, we have a web pages, we have a WEB-INF folder over here, we have a source packages, we have the libraries. If you can just click on this plus button, you can see all the libraries which are available inside your JDK. If you click onto the Glassfish server, it will consist of all the file which will provide it to us. We have a configuration files also. So this is how you're going to have. So now here, if you'll see, the configuration file is not having the web.xml file. Nowhere we are finding the web.xml file. Okay, so how we are going to find that web.xml file, I'll let you know. We have that steps also. Fine. So here we have to understand that this is a root directory. We have the web resources which can consist of your source packages, which can consist of your HTML or a JSP files. Okay, and this WEB-INF is your information folder which can consist of your classes or libraries. So this is like a something project directory we have created now. Now once you have done that, so we have index.jsp file. If you don't want to have the whenever we have seen this, whenever we're going to see this web pages, always remember you have two folders in your application. One is web pages, one is your source packages. Okay, when we talk about the web pages, always remember whatever you are going to develop for your client is been placed inside your web pages. So for example, if I am developing a GUI for my client using HTML, so I am going to include that HTML page into my web pages. Whenever I am going to create something for the server side, everything is going to be included into your source packages. Okay, so always remember, for client side we have a web pages, for a server side we have a source packages. Okay, now we know that there is one file already been existed, that is your index.jsp. If you don't want to work with index.jsp, if you're comfortable to work with HTML file to develop the basic UI for a client, what you can simply do is, like the way we are having the web pages, just right click on it. You have an option called as new HTML file. Okay, so it will automatically include your HTML file. Just start coding about your HTML, HTML tags just included, create your own UI for your client. So everything has been included inside your web pages. Now when we talk about the server side programming and the server side files, we have a source package, we know that. So when we click on it, we have an option called as what? New. And then you have an option called as servlet. So if you'll see at the right hand side, what options you are getting, you can create your servlet file also, you can create your JSP file also, you can create your normal Java class file also. Okay, so this all options you have when you want to create it for your server side. Now once you click on it, your new servlet, so you have an option to create a new servlet file and to add the servlet file in your program, in your web application. Why we are creating the servlet file? Because I want to code something for my web application for my server side. So I can give the class name over here. Okay, so this is going to be your class name of your servlet file. You can decide the location also where you want to. Okay, and you just have to go to the next step. Now it comes your web.xml file option. Okay, so till now when we have created that project, it was an optional for the application where I don't want to add the servlet file or something called as the server side programming. If you just want to work with an HTML or a JSP, it can work well without your XML file. But when I talk about the server side scripting or a server side programming, I need a web.xml file. Okay, so what is going to happen now here? We just have to check, because it is by default it is unchecked. So you just have to check it, so that what will happen, your deployment descriptor, that is your web.xml, is going to be added into your servlet file, into your web application, and just say finish. Okay, so once you are just finishing the creation of your servlet file, what will happen? Now one file that is been named as what, my servlet.java has been added into your source packages. Fine. Now when we talk about the web.xml, if you can see over here, the web.xml is also been added into your WEB-INF. We know that the WEB-INF is consisting of web.xml file. It is also been included in one of the folder that is something we known as what, configuration file. Okay, so we know that why web.xml file is being used. It is giving me an information, it is giving me an information about the configuration details, it is giving me an information about the mapping from one file to the another file. So it also presents inside your configuration file. Okay, now you can write some servlet code over here, okay, inside your servlet class. Once we have written, just say for example, I've told you, in the previous steps, that if I don't want to work with my JSP file, if I know the HTML better, I can do what, I can just right click on the web pages, I can select new HTML file. Then what you can do, you can have the HTML name, whatever name you want to give it, you can just give it and say finish. Now what you can do, you can write some simple code in your HTML, and you can write the servlet name or a servlet file which you have created and give the hyperlink. So what we are doing over here is, we are just creating an hyperlink, that is something we named as what, hello. So what is my expectation, whenever I'm going to click on to this particular value or a word, what should happen, it should get redirected to the servlet file which is named as what, my servlet. Okay, now here I don't have to mention that the connectivity steps and all those things, because it is all present inside one project directory. Okay, so whenever you are going to give a link to have the redirection to the other page, it is not going to have that errors or something like that, because it is going to search within your application, and if it is finding, it can directly redirect to that file. Okay, so now what we are doing, we are just having the web.xml file also. If you can see, we are just having a mapping that from the hello file we are going to have the servlet file. Okay, and this is your welcome page of your application, that is nothing but your index.html page, what XML version we are using, what encoding type we are using for our application, what web application version we are using, everything has been written over here, all the informations we are getting from the XML file. Okay, now, when I try to execute your, when we try to execute this program, what we have written right now, simply that we have an index file, and inside the index file, we have just given an hyperlink, and that value is going to be seen in your web page, that is your hello, in the form of hyperlink. So once I click on that hyperlink, it should get redirect to my web or the servlet file. Okay, so whatever we have written into the servlet file, it has been displayed into the web page. So now everything has been settled over here. I have just to run the program. So what I'm going to do, I am having an option, this one, the red button over here. You can simply click on it. It can directly going to compile and run your program. Once it will start with the compilation, if at all you have any error, it will not run your program, it will show you that error first. Okay, you have to solve it and then again click on it, so it will start deploying your application as well as compiling your application. Or else other option is, just right click on your web application name, that is something been your first name, first application which we have created, right click on it, say run. Okay, so it is going to deploy also, it is going to run your file also. Now this is something going to come in your servlet file, where I'm going to have a link, just click on it, and then you're going to have something, this message, with this message has been written inside your servlet file. Okay, so in the servlet file, whatever response we have written for a client is going to be displayed. Okay, so now this is the way we have done it. Now if time permits me, it is I think already 40. Okay, it's 9:40. We'll try to see some example. I'll give this example. Let's finish it off. Okay, now we're just going to have an example where I'm going to have a registration form. Okay, and now my expectation is that I'm going to have a registration form for my client. Okay, I'm just going to develop it using some HTML code, and I'm going to have some server side program that I'm going to use the servlet, and I'm also going to write some database connectivity steps. So but obvious, I have to create the database and the table for that data which I'm going to take it from my client. Okay, so I hope the picture is clear. I have a client page through which I am just accepting the registration details. Once the client is going to give all the registration details while clicking on the submit button, what should happen? It should get redirect to your servlet file. Once it is coming to the servlet file, the values should be get stored into the variables, and that values should be processed in such a way that it is going to get stored into your database. Okay, and getting stored into the database, so we have to do prior work in the database. That is, I have to create a database, I have to create a table inside that database, I have to create in columns for the field which I am going to take the value from the registration form. So that way I'm going to create the table, empty table. I'm not going to put any values manually. What is my expectation? My web page should accept the values automatically. My servlet code is going to process it and put it into the database. Okay, so now here, what is the first thing we are going to do? The very first thing is database creation. And inside the database, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a table, call it as what? Register user. Don't need to give this inverted commas. Create table, table name is the syntax. Now what we are going to do, we are just going to have the 4 columns. Okay, so name, password, email and country. All the variables being defined as what? As varchar 2. Okay, and the length we have decided over here as a parameter. Now when we talk about the HTML file, so in HTML what we are going to do, in the body tag, what we are going to have, we are going to have, always remember, whatever you write inside your body tag is something what is been seen inside your or into your web pages. Okay, so we are just going to start with your form tag, because we have to make the program understand, or your HTML file understand, that once this HTML file is being executed completely or accepted the value from the client, what exactly it has to do it. So what action it has to perform? It has to perform which action? That it should get redirect to the servlet file which names as what? Register. Or students, you can simply do is, you can just simply write action equals to register. You don't need to write the servlet slash register. Okay, you don't have to even mention that it is a servlet file. What you can simply write, action equals to, in inverted commas, just write the file name where you want to redirect from this HTML page. So which file I want to redirect to? The register file, which is nothing but my servlet file or a Java file. Okay, so no need to write the servlet slash, you can simply write the register over here, which is the name of my servlet file. And which method I am using it for having that action? I am using the post method. Fine. Now, how many parameters we have decided for the registration? Because we have created 4 columns in my database, so I am going to use 4 fields in my client page. Fine. So I have decided for name, password, email ID and country. Similarly, all the 4 columns are been created inside your database in your table. Okay, so the 4 columns are already present for accepting this 4 inputs value. So what I am doing, for a name, I am just creating a label for it. What is an input type? I am having text, and what is the name of the text will I have given? Username. Similarly for user password, similarly for user email. For the country, I have just given the drop down option. Okay, so the options are available: India, Pakistan and other. This is, I think, the basic HTML code, everyone knows about it. If you don't know, so you just let me know so that I can start explaining the way I am explaining your servlet code one by one. Okay, so but still I am just hoping that everyone knows it. If you don't know it, let me know, then I can just go with one line by one. Okay, so whenever I'm going to have a drop down option in the HTML, I have a tag called as what? Select a tag. Okay, so what name you have given for that? User, country. And what options we have inside that drop down? We have an option tag for putting the options inside your drop down. So 3 options we have given into our drop down list, that is your India, Pakistan and other. We have a submit button over here. Okay, while submission, where it should go? It should go to the register file. Okay, now when we talk about the register.java, so okay, so when we talk about the Java file, so we know that number of import statements are required. So when we talk about the servlet file, always remember we have 2 packages. Always import that 2 packages. That is your import javax.servlet.star, import javax.servlet.http.star. No need to write servlet exception over here. Just simply write star. It will make your life easy. Okay. Then we also need an io.star. We need an sql.star, because we need to have a database connectivity. Okay, so we have imported the statements which are required in our program. We have created our file, that is your class, that is register, and we are trying to extend which class over here, that is your HTTP servlet class. So if you remember that chapter, we have learned in these two packages. So I've told you, whenever we are going to work with a servlet, we have to make the program understand that we are going to write a servlet code. Okay. So if you'll just simply use a first package, so then you have an servlet interface. Okay, so what you are going to write, class register implements servlet, because that's an interface. But what I want to do it, I want to use a second package because it is more protocol specific, that is using HTTP protocol. So I'm just going to use, the HTTP servlet class, because it comes inside your http.star package, and it is a class. That's why we are using the keyword called as what, extends keyword. Okay, now we are using a method called as do post. So I have already taught you the basic structure of writing the servlet code, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so please remember whatever we are learning it. So now we are using what, do post method over here. So if you remember, we have used do post and do get method in place of service method. So when I'm going to use any interface or a class from your first package, so we are going to write everything inside your service method. Okay, but when we are going to use a second package, its class and interfaces, I'm going to use do post and do get method. Okay, and I have told you the difference between do post and do get, that do post is going to have an n number of data, unlimited length of data to be carried. Okay, now inside your service method, irrespective if I'm using the first package, and in place inside your do post or a do get method, which all things I'm going to create it. So when I talk about the online, requesting and responding, so we need the classes to do that work. So I have a client page, the registration form I have developed it. So I want the input from there. So that means what I want, I should have the request from the client. So in your second package, we have this HTTP servlet request interface, and this also we have studied while when we were learning about the basic structure. Okay, so why we need an HTTP servlet request, because we have extended HTTP servlet over here. So when I am going to use the servlet interface from your first package, so what is going to be replaced over here, instead of HTTP servlet request, it is only going to come as what, servlet request. Okay, so right now we are sticking to this HTTP servlet class. So we are going to work with the HTTP servlet request. Why this is being used, to accept the request from the client page. Okay, and we are creating an object for it. We are going to have the another one, that is your HTTP servlet response. Why it is being used, to respond to the client back while fetching the data from the database. So we are also creating an object for this. So why we are creating the object for these two interfaces, because this two object is going to be used throughout your program to deal with the things between your client and the database. Okay, you can mention some exceptions over here, that's not a problem. We learned that how this method is going to work, that is your set content type method. If I want to have a response for my client, so in which form the response is going to go to your client, as it is going to be seen. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use an object which I have created from your this interface, that is your HTTP servlet response. I'll just use that object dot set content type, like in which form, in which type the data is going to be seen to your client. So it is going to be seen in the form of textual format, and it is going to be in the HTML form. Okay, and for having that response, okay, for having that response for your client, so that response should come in the textual format, it should be written in the text format. Okay, for that need also we have a class called it as what, print writer class. Okay, so whatever data I want to write it into my web page in the text format, that is been allowed whenever I'm going to use a print writer class, which is going to allow me to have that text data into my web page. Okay, that's why I'm also using a response object over here. Now, what all parameters we had? We had the four fields: username, user password, user email, and user country. So all the data is being fetched from your client side, from your client fields, and it is being stored into the variables which we have created over here. So everyone is coming from the text fields. Okay, so the text field is going to have the string value. So that's why we have created a string variables over here, and we are trying to accept the request from the client. So but obvious, which object we are going to use, the request object. And I told you that when we are using the scanner class for the user input, so we have a next int method, next double method, next method to accept the different types of values. In servlet, I have a specific method for fetching the value from the client page to the server page, that is your get parameter method. Okay, so we are going to use this get parameter method to fetch the values from the different text fields, and each text fields I have given these names in your HTML file, and from this particular fields the values are going to get fetched and it is going to get stored into the variables. Now here in the try and catch block, I'm simply going to write the database connectivity step. So what is the very first step I am always having? That is your registration. So which is going to be done using your class.forName. Okay, so we had a connection interface. Again, the object I have created, I am just going to considering that driver manager is holding this particular JDBC driver, and I'm going to use a get connection method with all the URL parameters with the username and the password. So this is your host name, this is your port number, this is your database name, this is a username and the password. Now, what is an expectation from here? The data should come dynamically from the client and get it stored into the database. So which statement interface I'm going to use? I'm going to use a prepared statement interface. And if you remember, we had these 4 questions. So I am having 4 fields. So each question mark is going to represent each field, each column what we have created. Correct. So this program is almost similar to the one which we have done it already, so not going into the detail, but with this we have done it. Why we are using the prepared statement, you should understand. Okay, we are not simply using the statement interface, but we are using what? Prepared statement interface, because it is going to allow me to have the data into my table dynamically. So what is the table name? I have register user. Okay, so we have mentioned it over here in which database it is present. It is present inside your XC database with these credentials. Okay, so I have 4 columns, so I have written 4 question mark. Okay, now how we are going to put the values into the table? Using the set method. Okay, so if at all the columns is holding the integer value, so instead of set string, what I'm going to write? Set int. Okay, so for example, first column maybe it was your employee ID or some other ID. So ID always comes with your, like, we considering that it comes in your numeral form, so we are going to write as what? Set int method. No matter, like, it is not compulsion that it always comes into that, the form of integer. So it depends on you that which data type you want to use it for your column. So similarly, you have to change your variables also. Like if I'm accepting the value from the text field, it always going to come me as a string value. Okay, and if I want to convert it into the integer value, I have to do the typecasting then. Okay, right now we have not done that. So what we are doing, we are considering all the string values and we are just using the set string method. So we are just going to use an object of your prepared statement interface. We are going to set the value of your first column, and that the variable is what? Your variable name, what we have given over here, that is your n for your username. Okay, and the variable which is coming in your p variable, the value which is coming into your p variable, that is going to be given for your second column, similarly for your third and the fourth column. And I told you that we have to compulsorily use one method, that is what? Your execute method, because it execute update method, because your table is consisting of empty rows. So if I want to update from the empty to the filled one, what values we are trying to feed into it, so I have to use which method? Execute update method. Okay, so now what simply we are doing over here, I'm just declaring a variable over here, that is I, and I'm just saying that execute update. Okay, I'm just calling this method. So what will happen? So whatever, the updation will happen into your rows, so it is going to put the value over here. So for example, I have updated one row, so it is going to put the value as what? 1. Okay, so because execute update method is returning me the integral value, that how many numbers of rows have been affected. Okay, when we have studied that 3 methods, the descriptions, that what execute update method is going to give me, it is going to return to me the number of the rows which has been affected. Okay, so if it is returning me the number, so that's why I'm declaring the integer value over here, integer variable over here. So when I'm going to fire this execute update method, that how many rows have been affected, it is going to return to me that. So if for example I have affected 4 rows, or I have inserted 4 rows, so what is the value? Say 4. So simply I'm going to have a comparison over here, that if the I value is greater than what? 0. 0 is means what? Empty. Okay, but if it is greater than 0, even if it is 1, then what we are going to have a message, that is you have successfully registered. Okay, so this is how your things are going to work. We are just done with this chapter and this example. I hope you have understood. Okay, and now I'm just going to stop sharing this. If you have not understood any concept, students, please let me know. so that I can solve it. Okay, and if you want to send it to me personally, you can do that also through WhatsApp or any other communication mode, and I will try to solve it. Fine. So we are just done with your unit 1, and all the 6 chapters I have completed. And just start preparing yourself. Saturday we are just going to have that small test. I told you that it can be descriptive also. Just the trust which I can do that you are going to do it genuinely. Fine. So thank you. I'm just going to share you the attendance link. Fill it fast and then you can move ahead with the second lecture.